Hey guys, quick creepy fact. Only 20% of you watching are subscribed. It's totally free and helps me write more scary stories like this one. Thank you for the support. Now let's dive right in. I've lived in Denver my whole life. I was born here, raised here, and probably, if fate has even the slightest sense of humor, going to die here too. Hopefully not at the airport, but honestly, I wouldn't put it past the universe to go for poetic irony. If you've spent even 5 minutes online, you've probably heard at least one of the conspiracy theories about our beloved Denver International Airport. People talk about the barbed wire on the perimeter fences, pointing out how it curves inward instead of outward, like it's designed to keep something inside rather than to keep people out. There are whispers about underground bunkers and hidden chambers, secret societies pulling strings beneath the runways, and even lizard people, or reptilian overlords if you want to be formal. The place is covered in giant, unsettling murals too, the kind that make you stop mid-walk and wonder what kind of fever dream you've just stepped into. They're full of gas masks and burning cities, like someone knew a bit too much and decided to paint their apocalypse nightmares across the terminal walls. I'd heard all of it. I laughed at most of it. Honestly, I once went to a Halloween party dressed as a lizard person with a fake DIA badge just to mess with my cousin who's deep into the whole conspiracy circuit. So yeah, I knew the stories. That was before Katie called me. Katie was a friend of mine, someone I hadn't heard from in months, who worked airport security, or at least that's what I thought. She reached out of nowhere and told me the airport was hiring. It's not glamorous, she warned. Mostly baggage checks, long hours, and grown adults who throw tantrums like toddlers. But the pay's good, and we could use someone who's not a total tool. At the time, I didn't have anything better going on. My last job was a retail nightmare, folding clothes for minimum wage while pretending I couldn't hear Karen demanding a manager over a mislabeled sweater. So when she sent me the application link, I filled it out. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I didn't expect to get hired, and I definitely didn't expect to like it, but at the very least, it had to be better than getting screamed at over coupons. The next day, I was in the middle of microwaving some sad leftover lasagna when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Hi, is this Teresa?" chirped a cheerful voice on the other end. Way too energetic for the hour. Yeah. Speaking. This is Susan from Denver International's HR department. You applied for the security screening position? Yeah, I did, I said, still not entirely convinced this wasn't a scam call. Great. We're actually conducting phone interviews right now. If you have a few minutes, we can go ahead and get started. And just like that, I was thrown into the fastest interview I've ever had in my life. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, just a blur of rapid-fire questions about my availability, how I'd handle difficult passengers, and whether I was okay working overnight shifts without much supervision. Then, without any fanfare, she said the words I didn't expect to hear. "Well, congratulations, Teresa. We'd love to have you on board. Can you start tomorrow?" I showed up the next day, wearing my cleanest black slacks, a collared shirt, and my best, "please take me seriously" face. The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos. Lines curling through security like stressed-out snakes, passengers dragging overstuffed bags behind them like emotional baggage with wheels, and announcements echoing overhead with that perfect mix of urgency and disinterest. But I wasn't heading to the usual public entrance. I'd been told to use the employee-only access on the east side of the building, a narrow, windowless hallway most people probably never even notice. It smelled like ammonia and worn-out rubber soles. The fluorescent lights above hummed with that headache-inducing buzz unique to government buildings and hospitals. I followed the hallway until it spilled into a small waiting area where a man in a gray windbreaker stood with his arms folded across his chest. The word security was stitched over his heart in thick white thread. He looked like he had seen things, real things. His hair was short and graying at the temples, and he wore a deep frown that looked permanent, like his face had forgotten how to do anything else. "You Teresa?" he asked. "That's me," I said, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. "Good, I'm Terry, security manager." He nodded toward the only other person in the room, a girl about my age with long, wavy dark hair and a nervous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's Anna. You're both starting today." We shook hands. Her fingers were ice cold, but I wasn't sure mine weren't just as clammy. She gave me a quick smile, the kind you give a stranger when you both realize you're about to be stuck in the same sinking ship. Terry didn't waste time. He led us through a rapid-fire tour of the behind-the-scenes sections of the airport. Staff-only security checkpoints, musty break rooms, storage closets that smelled like lemon cleaner and despair, and eventually the tunnels that snaked beneath the terminals, long, sterile corridors that the public never sees. He talked about chain of command, radio etiquette, shift schedules, and what to do if a passenger started a fist fight with a TSA agent. All standard stuff. Then we got to the break room. It was a sad little corner of the underworld, lit by yellowing fluorescents. A battered coffee machine wheezed in the corner. The table wobbled when you looked at it too hard. Terry paused by the counter and opened a drawer. "I need to give you both something," he said, pulling out 2 folded pieces of paper. They were plain. No letterhead, no fancy logos, just white printer paper with visible creases like they'd been passed around more than once. He handed one to me and one to Anna. For a split second, his expression changed, just enough to notice. Not quite fear, but something close. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. "These are the rules," he said flatly. "Not the TSA kind, internal protocol." I started to unfold mine, curious, but he raised one hand to stop me. "Read them later. Memorize them. Follow them. Every word." There was no smile, no wink, no just messing with you. Anna and I exchanged a look. Neither of us said anything. Terry gave a stiff nod, then turned and walked out of the break room without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Anna blinked first. "Okay," she said, dragging out the word like she wasn't sure it was even legal to speak. "What's your bet? Orientation quiz? Or maybe a company prayer to the almighty baggage belt?" I let out a dry laugh and dropped into the nearest chair, flattening the paper out in front of me. The rules weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. They weren't the kind you'd find in a standard orientation packet, the ones about clocking in on time or wearing the proper shoes. These were something else entirely, and they read like they had been written by someone who had already made every mistake on the list. Rules for surviving the night shift. Never take the underground tunnel alone after midnight. 2. If you see a coworker with the wrong face, wrong height, wrong shadow, pretend not to notice. Smile, nod, and walk away slowly. 3. When the PA system plays music instead of announcements, stop working and hide until it ends. They are hunting. 4. If you find a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" that you've never seen before, do not open it. 5. If you pass a mirror and your reflection is smiling when you are not, you must look away immediately. Do not make eye contact. Do not acknowledge it. You don't want to know what's on the other side. As I read the list aloud, my voice began to falter. By the time I reached the final line, my throat felt dry and tight, like I had swallowed sand. When I looked up, Anna hadn't moved. She was still holding her own paper with both hands, staring down at it as if expecting the words to rearrange into something more sensible. Her knuckles were white, and she looked paler than she had just minutes earlier. "This has to be a joke, right?" she asked quietly, although it was clear she didn't entirely believe that. "It's probably just their weird way of hazing new hires. Like creepy HR icebreakers. Watch out for the spooky mirror demons. That kind of thing." She let out a nervous laugh, but it sounded more forced than amused. We didn't say anything else after that. Instead, we walked back toward the security office, badged in, and picked up our radios from the counter. Then we stepped through the secure doors and out into the humming fluorescence of Concourse B, trying to pretend it was just another job on just another quiet night. At first, it actually felt like it might be. The terminal wasn't crowded, just a few late-night flights and scattered passengers. We were assigned to shadow a senior staff member named Gina, a woman who moved with the kind of brisk efficiency that only comes from years of dealing with sleep-deprived travelers and TSA overreach. Gina didn't smile often, but she was patient, showing us how to use the check-in system and pointing out the quirks of the oversized luggage process. She made it clear she wasn't there to babysit us, but she wasn't cruel about it either. It was the kind of quiet mentorship you only noticed when you thought about it later. The shift itself wasn't bad. It was mostly just tired people trying to catch red-eye flights, families arguing about snacks, and the constant low murmur of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements. I almost let myself relax. Almost convinced myself that maybe this was all just overblown superstition, and that the rules were some kind of leftover office legend that had taken on a life of its own. But then he appeared. I was in the middle of explaining to a very disgruntled man that his emotional support peacock was not going to be allowed through security, no matter how many laminated forms he printed out. I caught sight of someone approaching the station out of the corner of my eye. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He was wearing the same uniform we were. His stride was steady. His posture was straight. But then I looked closer. He was tall, and not just tall enough to play basketball. He was unnaturally tall. His arms were long, too long, and his torso looked stretched like someone had grabbed the top of him and pulled. His fingers were thin and stiff, and his airport polo hung off him like it wasn't made for a human body at all. The way he moved didn't help. There was a mechanical quality to it, like each step had been pre-programmed. But what froze me wasn't the way he walked. It was his face. He was smiling, not in a polite, professional way. Not even in a customer service way. His smile was wide and absolutely still. It didn't twitch or fade. It didn't soften. It looked like someone had cut it into his face with a knife and then forgotten to stop. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, calm, and soft, but the words didn't match the movement of his mouth. I saw his lips form shapes that didn't go with the sounds I was hearing, like a bad dub on an old VHS tape. Anna turned toward him without hesitation. "Hi, do you need help with something?" she asked, her voice friendly and professional. He tilted his head slightly to one side, the smile never leaving his face. "I'm just looking for my assignment," he replied. Anna glanced down at the roster on her tablet. She scrolled through the list, squinting slightly. "What's your name?" He didn't respond. I took a step closer, and that's when I noticed his badge. There was no name on it, just a barcode. No department, no designation. And where his photo should have been, there was only a solid black square, not blank, but black. I reached out and tugged Anna's sleeve. "Anna," I whispered. "Come here, right now." She glanced at me, confused. "What?" "I'm trying to. Now," I said, with enough urgency in my tone that she finally followed me behind the counter. I fished the folded paper from my pocket and unfolded it with shaking fingers. I pointed directly to rule number 3 and held it up in front of her. If you see a coworker with the wrong face, wrong height, wrong shadow, pretend not to notice. Smile, nod, and walk away slowly. Anna's eyes flicked between the rule and my face. She didn't speak, but I saw the recognition hit her like a slap. She slowly turned and looked back toward the man at the counter. He was still standing there, still smiling, still not blinking. His eyes were fixed on us, but there was no curiosity in them. No frustration, no humanity. Just observation, just watching. I could see the blood drain from Anna's face as she swallowed and nodded slightly. "Let's close the station," she said, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. I grabbed the small sign from beneath the counter and flipped it open, placing it firmly on the counter. "This station is currently closed," I announced, injecting false cheer into my voice. "Please proceed to line B for assistance." Passengers grumbled and shuffled away, dragging their bags along without much protest. The noise of wheels against tile felt suddenly too loud in the eerie silence that followed. We didn't look back, we just moved to another station, smiling at passengers, asking for IDs, pretending everything was completely normal. But as we worked, I could feel him. He never left, he never moved. He just stood there in front of the closed station, staring across the terminal, his smile frozen like it was carved into bone. He didn't speak again. He didn't try to approach, but he didn't blink either. And for the rest of the hour I felt his eyes on us, calm, patient, and impossible to ignore. There's something deeply unsettling about airports at night, something that just doesn't sit right once the sun goes down. Whatever the reason, I felt it that night. Anna and I were on our way back to the break room, walking slowly because our feet were starting to ache and our energy had long since burned out. Our shift was inching toward midnight, and I was mid-rant about how the vending machine had eaten my granola bar money again when I heard something. Music. At first, it was soft, barely there, a whisper beneath the buzz of the fluorescents. I stopped mid-sentence, unsure if I was just imagining it. Anna stopped too. She tilted her head slightly, and I could see her brow furrow as she strained to listen. "You hear that?" she whispered, her voice low enough to barely register. I nodded, already feeling the first cold thread of unease slide down my spine. It wasn't pop music. It wasn't lo-fi beats or any kind of canned airport soundtrack. It wasn't even elevator jazz. It was orchestral, classical, something old and sweeping. "It's coming from the intercom," I murmured, the words catching in my throat. Anna's eyes met mine, wide and uncertain. We didn't say another word. We just moved. Together, without speaking, we turned and slipped through the nearest door we could find, an unmarked storage closet tucked between two rolling service gates. By some miracle, it wasn't locked. Inside, the air was stale and the space was cramped. The walls were lined with reflective neon cones, battered mop buckets, and rows of fluorescent yellow vests hanging like limp, forgotten skins. We pulled the door shut behind us just as the music outside began to swell. We stood in the narrow aisle between metal shelving units, our backs pressed close to the wall, trying to breathe quietly. Neither of us dared to speak. The music continued to build, the tempo quickening. The strings trembled and twisted together, forming something that sounded less like a melody and more like a warning. And then, just beyond the door, scratch. My heart stopped. It was slow at first, a single drag of something against the metal door. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was deliberate, like something was trying to figure out how the handle worked. Anna's hand flew to her mouth, covering it before any sound could escape. I could feel her trembling beside me. The scratching paused. For a long moment, the only sound was the orchestral swell spilling from the speakers outside, climbing higher and higher, like the score to a nightmare we hadn't realized we were already inside. Then came a new sound, just as wrong. The music reached a crescendo, a frantic peak of strings that felt like it was vibrating the air inside our lungs. And then, silence. No fade out, no final note, it just stopped. The sudden stillness made my ears ring. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. Time didn't feel real anymore. Eventually, after what felt like several lifetimes packed into a handful of minutes, Anna crept closer to the door. She leaned in and pressed her ear gently against the metal, listening. I held my breath. Nothing. She glanced back at me and gave a small nod before carefully reaching for the handle. The door creaked as it opened. The hallway outside looked exactly the same pale lighting, the same tile floor. But on the door, where the scratching had come from, there were 5 deep gouges carved into the metal. Each one was long, uneven, and jagged, like something had pressed down with more force than should have been possible. I reached out slowly and ran my fingers over one of the marks. The edges weren't just scratched, they were bent outward. Whatever had been on the other side of that door hadn't just scratched at it, it had tried to pull it open. "Teresa," Anna said quietly, her voice barely above a breath. Whatever was outside, that wasn't human. I didn't answer her right away. I was too focused on the warped metal beneath my fingertips. She was right. Whatever had been there, it wasn't just playing a prank. It wasn't a lost passenger or a creepy coworker. Something else had been out there. Neither of us talked on the way back to the break room. We didn't crack a joke. We didn't whisper. We didn't even pretend things were normal. Something about the music, about the scratches on the door, had changed the air around us. Even though the PA system had gone quiet, the feeling hadn't lifted. The airport was completely silent now. There were no voices over the intercom, no shuffling footsteps from passing travelers, no distant thrum of a cleaning crew. The silence was absolute, so thick and still it felt like we were underwater. When we finally reached the break room, it looked exactly the way we had left it. The vending machines were still humming softly in the corner. One of the overhead lights was stuttering out its final moments in a sluggish flicker, and the scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air like it had been trapped there for years. Anna dropped into one of the plastic chairs with a soft sigh and pulled out a small container of cold pasta salad. I opened the foil around my long-forgotten microwave burrito and stared at it like I was trying to remember how food worked. We didn't talk for a few minutes. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make the tension between us worse. Eventually, Anna spoke. "Honestly," she said, poking at her dinner with a flimsy plastic fork, "I get why the last people quit. The vibes here are completely off." I didn't disagree. I just made a non-committal sound around a mouthful of burrito and kept chewing. I wasn't even sure if I was hungry anymore. If the eerie music hadn't sealed the deal, the claw marks on the storage closet door definitely had. Anna stood up and dusted crumbs off her lap. "Bathroom. I'll be right back," she mumbled. I gave a quick wave in her direction but didn't bother to joke. I was too tired to try and sound casual and too unsettled to make light of anything anymore. As I sat there alone, picking at my half-eaten food and listening to the vending machine drone in the corner, I started to relax just enough to let my guard down. That was when I heard it again. Scratch. The sound came from the front of the break room, soft, slow, and horribly familiar. I froze in place, my fork still halfway to my mouth. My body kicked into motion before my mind caught up. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair, and moved toward the hallway. I needed to find Anna. The corridor was empty and silent, but the air felt wrong again. I reached the women's restroom and pushed the door open quickly, expecting to find Anna at the sink or drying her hands. Instead, she was standing in front of the mirror, completely still. At first, I assumed she was just zoning out, lost in thought after the chaos of the last hour. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't shifting her weight or breathing visibly. Her body was motionless, unnaturally still. And her reflection was moving. The Anna in the mirror was smiling. It wasn't a warm smile, and it wasn't tired or awkward. It stretched too far across her face, like her skin had been pulled beyond its limits, and her eyes gleamed with something that didn't belong to any living person. As I stood there, frozen in the doorway, her reflection raised one hand slowly and waved at me, her fingers bending like they were made of melting wax. My breath caught in my throat. "Anna?" I asked, my voice small and cracking. The real Anna, if that's what she still was, turned toward me. Her movements were stiff and slow, like her limbs had forgotten how to operate properly. Then her face began to change. Her jaw dropped too far, hanging loosely from her skull like it had dislocated without resistance. One of her eyes swelled and bulged grotesquely, while the other shrank, shifting upward like it was trying to escape. Her skin rippled across her cheekbones, fluttering like something beneath the surface was pushing outward. Whatever I was looking at, it wasn't Anna anymore. It was something wearing her skin, and that skin didn't quite fit. The fear hit me so fast it didn't feel real. My limbs moved before I could think. She lunged. I screamed as I stumbled backward, slamming the bathroom door shut just in time to hear her body hit it on the other side. The sound she made when she collided with the door was something wet and solid, like a side of raw meat being thrown against concrete. I didn't wait to see if she was coming again. I turned and ran. My footsteps echoed wildly down the corridor as I sprinted away from the bathroom, away from that thing with Anna's face and too many joints bending the wrong way. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. All I knew was that I had to get away, and fast. I passed the break room again, completely forgetting about the scratching I'd heard earlier, and rounded a corner blindly. Behind me, I heard it. Not the slap of feet, not the shuffle of shoes. It was a horrible, sickening scrabbling, like something crawling on all fours at impossible speed, dragging its limbs across the floor in chaotic bursts of momentum. I risked a glance over my shoulder. I shouldn't have. She was behind me. Or rather, the thing that had replaced her was. Her limbs bent at sickening angles as she charged forward, her long arms slapping the ground like a spider moving too fast to be real. Her head lolled from side to side, hanging too loosely on her neck, and her mouth was wide open in a grin that split her face like a knife wound. Ropes of saliva swung from her jaw as she moved, flinging wet strings across the tile with every leap. She was catching up. I grabbed the nearest door handle I could find and yanked. The door opened, and I stumbled through it, barely keeping my balance. Concrete stairs spiraled downward. Every part of me screamed not to go down. But I didn't have time to second guess. I could hear her behind me, snarling and clawing, and the door was already groaning as her weight slammed into it. I ran. I took the stairs 2 at a time, boots hammering against the concrete. My lungs burned. My legs screamed, But I didn't stop. Down one flight, then another, then a third. Still, there were no exits, just walls and stairs and nowhere else to go. Finally, the stairs ended in a long, dim hallway that stretched out endlessly beneath flickering lights. The floor buzzed faintly beneath me, and the lights above gave off that same teeth-itching hum I'd heard before. The hallway shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have been there, but I didn't have a choice. I bolted down the hallway, pushing my body harder than I thought it could go. My lungs were shredding, my throat raw with every gasp. She was faster than I'd thought. Halfway down the corridor, she lunged. I barely turned before the full weight of her hit me like a wrecking ball. We hit the ground hard, my back slamming into the concrete as her limbs wrapped around me. Her skin was slick and hot, her muscles pulsing beneath shredded fabric and torn flesh. Up close, she was worse than I had imagined. Her face twisted and snapped as she screeched, ropes of saliva pouring from her mouth as she snapped her teeth toward my throat. I screamed, flailing wildly, trying to shove her off. Her hands gripped at my shoulders with bone-crushing strength, her fingers jerking and twitching like they weren't sure what they were supposed to be doing. Desperation gave me strength. I clenched my fist and swung it directly into her face with everything I had. Her head snapped back with a sickening crack, and she reeled, her limbs flailing as her balance faltered. Her body buckled beneath her, joints twisting at impossible angles as she crashed to the floor. There was another sharp crack, this one louder, and then she stopped moving. Her head lolled at an angle no human neck could sustain. I didn't check to see if she was breathing. I didn't wait, I ran. At the far end of the hallway, I saw another stairwell. The door was rusted and half open, but I didn't care. I sprinted toward it, threw myself up the steps, and didn't stop climbing until my legs gave out. I slammed through the stairwell door, lungs on fire and heart hammering like it was trying to break free from my chest. I didn't stop to catch my breath or check if the thing wearing Anna's skin was still behind me. I just ran. Then I stopped cold. The terminal wasn't empty anymore. Classical music, loud enough to shake the floor tiles, was pouring from the PA system. Violins shrieked and cellos groaned in wild, dissonant waves, twisting into a sound so sharp it felt like it was scraping the inside of my skull. The music was back. I didn't think. I didn't look around for a safer option. I just bolted forward, sprinting toward the nearest door I could find. It was just ahead, metal, polished and unmistakably marked with a gleaming silver sign. Authorized personnel only. I knew the rule. I remembered it word for word. If you find a door marked authorized personnel only that you've never seen before, do not open it, even if you hear crying. I didn't care what the paper said or what Terry had warned us about. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. Inside was the break room. Not a new one, not a different one. The same break room, the same humming vending machines, still glowing faintly in the corner. The same overhead fluorescent lights flickering lazily, casting tired shadows onto the floor. The same ancient microwave blinking 12, as if it had been trapped in some kind of eternal reset. And on the table, right where I had left it, my dinner. Still sitting there. Still half-eaten. Still impaled by the same plastic fork. I froze, staring at it. There was no possible way I had run in a circle. I had barreled down stairwells, sprinted through miles of forgotten hallway, and escaped something that should not have existed. I should have been anywhere else. But there it was, the burrito, right where I had abandoned it. I took a slow step backward and bumped into one of the plastic chairs, the screech of its legs on tile making me jump. The music was still wailing somewhere beyond the door behind me. But in here, the air was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I turned away from the table and tried the next door. It opened without resistance. On the other side was another break room, same layout, same vending machines, same plastic chairs arranged in the same crooked half circle around the table. And sitting on that table again, my dinner. The exact same burrito, the same sad fork, even the same bent corner in the foil. I stepped back slowly. My breath had started to quicken, coming in short gasps. I turned and opened the door behind me. Another break room. Same again. I tried the next one, then the next, then 5 more in a row. No matter where I went, the rooms were identical, like someone had copy-pasted the same space over and over, each one stitched together at the seams by doors that never should have connected. Each time, I entered expecting something different. an exit sign, a missing chair, even just a different flavor of sadness in the air. But no. Every detail remained the same. The same flickering lights, the same humming machines, the same exact dinner waiting for me, cold and uneaten, like some kind of punishment I didn't understand. After the fourth room, I realized I was crying, tears running hot down my face while my mouth hung open in a silent gasp I couldn't seem to close. My chest was tight, like I couldn't take in enough air, no matter how hard I tried. The pressure in my head was building with every step, as though the air in these rooms wasn't meant for human lungs. I kept moving, trying door after door in a panic. I sprinted through them now, desperate to find something different, anything that wasn't this looping nightmare. Eventually, I stumbled into a break room that looked the same in every way except for one detail. There was a bathroom tucked into the far corner. I didn't hesitate. I rushed toward it, flung open the door, and locked myself inside one of the stalls with shaking hands. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, curled up with my back pressed to the metal wall. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My entire body was soaked with sweat, but I felt freezing. My thoughts were jumbled and looping like the rooms I had just passed through. I couldn't make sense of how I got here, or how to get out, or how long I'd even been in this place. That's when I heard the scratching again. This time, it came from the outside of the stall door. Something was drawing lines down the thin wood surface, like it was testing how strong the barrier really was, like it wanted me to know it was still out there, and that it wasn't in any rush. I clapped both hands over my mouth to stop myself from crying out. I sat frozen, pressed into the corner, listening as the sound continued, scratch after scratch, methodical and patient. Then came the voice. Teresa. It was soft at first, gentle, a whisper, almost affectionate. Come out, Teresa. It's okay. The voice was wrong. It had the tone of someone trying to lure a stray animal into a trap, sweet and soothing and rehearsed, like it had practiced human empathy in the mirror and hadn't gotten the rhythm quite right. Just open door T, I can help you. The voice was closer now. I could hear the shift in sound as it moved directly in front of my stall. I rocked in place, back and forth, small movements I couldn't seem to stop. I squeezed my eyes shut and willed the voice to go away. At some point, I don't know when, I broke. I screamed. I screamed until my throat burned, until my lungs felt like they were filled with shards of glass. I screamed every word I could think of to make it leave me alone, even though I knew none of it would matter. And then, without warning, the voice stopped. There was no fading or retreat, just silence. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. The lights above flickered softly, the only sign that time hadn't completely frozen. Then I heard the bathroom door open, footsteps, and a voice I recognized. Teresa? I froze in place. I didn't even dare to breathe. The voice sounded exactly like Anna's. Teresa, are you in here? She called, her tone soft and confused, like nothing at all was wrong. No, no way. That thing had used her voice before. It had chased me down a stairwell with her face twisted into something unrecognizable. It had tried to pull me apart in a hallway that shouldn't have existed. I wasn't falling for it again. But then she spoke again, her voice cracking just slightly. It's just me. Are you okay? Something about the way she said it felt real, not perfect, not rehearsed. There was hesitation in her words. Worry. Something human. Slowly, cautiously, I crouched down and peered under the stall door, and there she was. She was standing in her uniform, looking normal and whole. She was not twisted. Neither was she snarling. There was no blood, no broken joints, no inhuman smile. She just looked like Anna. She shifted awkwardly from one foot to the other, clearly unsure what to do. I stared for a long moment, unable to trust what I was seeing. Then I flung the door open and nearly collapsed into her. I started babbling, barely pausing for breath. I told her everything, about the scratching, the endless break rooms, the voice pretending to be her, and the thing that had chased me through the underbelly of the airport. Anna stared at me with wide eyes, looking more confused than afraid. Teresa, she said slowly, her brows furrowing as she tried to follow my breathless explanation. You've only been in here for like 5 minutes. You ran in here after the music stopped, and then you just started screaming. I thought you were hurt. I couldn't find words to respond. 5 minutes. It felt like hours. It felt like forever. Right then, Standing in the bathroom under those flickering lights and the smell of cheap disinfectant, I made up my mind. I was done. I quit. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. I scrolled until I found Katie's number. The one who had told me about the job in the first place. Why the hell would you tell me to work here? This place is cursed. Seriously. What the actual hell, Katie? The typing bubbles appeared instantly. She was already replying. What are you talking about? I stared at the screen, confused and angry. You said there was an opening at the airport. You told me the pay was good. You said you worked here. The next reply came fast. Teresa, I don't work there. I never have.